excuse me, of April 16th, 2024. Please join the board in a pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Canty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This meeting is going to be conducted in a hybrid format pursuant to modifications made to the open meeting law by the Legislature of the Commonwealth. Members of the public that wish to join this meeting may do so by joining us physically here at Town Hall. They may join us virtually over the Zoom webinar platform using the link that is provided on the agenda that is posted on the town website. May also observe this meeting on your television, on Comcast Channel 9, Verizon Channel 47, or on PAC TV's website. You may stream it live. Mr. Chairman, if there's no other business, I would read the executive session language at this time.
Please.
The Select Board will hold an executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Clause 6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. This is in relation to 260 Ryder Way. I would make a motion that we enter into executive session and return thereafter at this time.
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Blutzer. Discussion? Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Helm?
Yes.
Mr. Blutzer?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you. The board will be returning at approximately 6 p.m. Thank you. Welcome to the Select Board meeting of April 16th, 2024. Mr. Brandisi.
Great. Thank you, everybody, Town Manager. I'd like to introduce this evening for the first time Jackie Tobin, who's sitting across from us. Jackie is the newest executive assistant to the Select Board. Jackie started her career working for the town of Plymouth back in 2020, working for the Water Division, and then has worked the last 18 months over in procurement. So Jackie, with a lot of encouragement and begging on my part, has agreed to come take on this position. So I've known Jackie for a couple of years now, and we're really excited to have her come to the fourth floor and support the needs of the Select Board. So welcome aboard, Jackie. Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thanks, Jackie.
We're going to move right on to the licenses and administrative notes. If the board so desires, we can take them all, or whatever your wish.
I'll make a motion, unless there are any questions from any of my colleagues, that we handle all of the licenses, utility petitions, the surrender of licenses, the renewals, and the administrative notes as a group.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Helm. Discussion? Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Helm?
Yes.
Mr. Blutzer?
I vote yes.
And myself, yes. Unanimous. Red Cross Month activities, Plymouth Fire. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the board. So tonight I'm going to introduce Barbara Cotton. She is the Executive Director of the Southeastern Chapter of the American Red Cross of Massachusetts, and she's going to discuss a campaign that American Red Cross has been doing for the past several years, partnering up with communities in an effort to make sure that every home that needs a smoke detector has one. Very important, near and dear to the fire department's mission. A lot of the fires that we go to, tragically, we do encounter injuries and sometimes deaths. And excuse me, a lot of the time, when we go back in part of our investigation, we find that smoke detectors either weren't functioning or they weren't installed correctly or where they should have been. So this is a great program to make sure that anybody has access to smoke detectors that needs them. So on that note, I'd like to introduce Barbara Cotton.
Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here, and I just want to say thank you so much for the incredible support for this particular program. I did prepare just a very brief overview because I thought for anybody who hasn't heard about this program, it would be really important, and for the community at home that they know that they could participate. So, Jackie, hi. Thanks. I did make it. If you could advance to the next slide. You've got the clicker right there. Oh, I do. Even better. Fantastic. So really quickly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Home Fire Campaign impact and then the Home Fires and the Red Cross response. And for those of you who don't know, my role as the executive director was really dynamic. I started the week going into the pandemic, so this is year 4 for me. But this program here, Home Fire Campaign, is something that happens every single day for the Red Cross. So even though you'll see us in disaster vests across the country for natural disasters, we respond to home fires, as many as 3 every single day. And there are 81 cities and towns just in the Southeastern Mass chapter, which is the chapter that I cover. So today I think I had 12 fires that I was keeping track of across the state of Massachusetts, and one in New Bedford just not too long ago. And so for those who know the work of the Red Cross, yes, blood drives, and yes, we do a lot with CPR and trainings, and we do a lot with our veterans, but Home Fire Campaign is near and dear to our heart. And so about 10 years ago, the National American Red Cross started this campaign called Sound the Alarm, which is really a focus campaign of our Evergreen Home Fire Campaign. And it just puts a real lens on picking a focus city and communities in each of the states across the country where we do a blitz. And so our goal is to be in Plymouth on May 4th, on that Saturday, and we will be making at least 50 homes safer. And this is a free program that's offered by the American Red Cross. So since this program started, we know that it has saved 1,393 lives. And in fact, that number is old as of 2 weeks ago, because last year we'd installed smoke alarms in Boston, in the city of Boston, and a response that we had 2 weeks ago was tied to 2 of our volunteers that installed those smoke alarms. And so everyone did get out safely, and that's how we track it. So we know that this program has made over 1 million households safer. We've installed 2 million, almost 2,500,000 smoke alarms. And what we do here in Massachusetts is we also install a carbon monoxide detector. So not all of our programs do that, but we will go into a home, somebody will call for an appointment, and we install up to 3 smoke alarms and 1 carbon monoxide detector. Where the Red Cross fits in here, so our Red Cross staff and volunteers have been trained to support and respond with compassion and empathy. And so the fire department, they will tell you when they get there, their job is to knock that fire down, and ours is to hold the hand of somebody who's just lost everything. And so our primary role is in sheltering. We will help them to find a place to stay, and we provide the financial resources to do so. So that client assistance, those donations that come in, we are not government funded. Those are all donations that are provided by the community, are given as financial resources. And so again, really important to know that if you ever experience a home fire and you are displaced, that the Red Cross does provide those resources. In addition to that, we also have caseworkers who provide referrals. We work very closely with partner agencies. So anybody who in the room who's a partner agency says, hey, wait, I didn't know that, or I know somebody who could benefit from the services of the Red Cross, please do keep us in mind. So where we fit in here, our volunteers will go into high-risk communities. And Plymouth is considered a vulnerable community, just like the Cape is. And people will go like, I don't really understand how the Cape falls in as a vulnerable community, because pretty much all my affluent friends go there for the summer. But we have the oldest population. In fact, Orleans is the oldest community, one of the top 10 in the entire country. So age factors into that, as well as geography. And so we're looking for vulnerable communities, people who have children, and seniors who might also be a candidate for this particular program. And what we do is we go in and test an existing smoke alarm. We'll install up to 3 new alarms if those are needed, and we'll also review the smoke alarm maintenance with residents. So, taking the broom and swiping it off the ceiling may deaden the sound, but it's not a wise course of action. And we will provide this program at any time of the year. So when people see this flyer, if they're not available on May 4th to participate, they can certainly call the Red Cross. We will come out and make an appointment for them to be able to do this at another time. And we do this in every community in all 81 cities and towns. We teach residents about home safety. We'll oftentimes find that when we get into the communities or into the family home, children haven't talked about it. So we always pick the tree. Where are we going to go to evacuate safely? Children are known to hide under a bed and to run and be frightened. So we teach them to be able to be resilient and know how to handle that emergency, because you have only 2 minutes to get out of your home safely. So we help them to develop an evacuation plan. So this is just a quick overview of the day. We are very lucky that James Creed, who is the K-9 captain for the Plymouth County Sheriff's Office, is on our board of directors, and the Plymouth County Sheriff's Office will be the host of our rally and kind of our convening spot. We'll have a large breakfast and rally for all of our volunteers. We're expecting about 75 that will go out in teams of 3 to 4 to do these installations. You'll hear some impact stories, come back and have a lunch. We have a fabulous donation from Rose and Vicky's, and we'll talk about the results that we saw that day. The flyer on the right-hand side has a QR code for easy sign-up. And basically, for how you can help, we'd love your support on social media to be able to put this out. We've connected with a lot of community resources to try to get the word out. Neil, thank you so much. You're going to do a PSA tomorrow. If anybody would like to do a PSA, anybody here would like to volunteer, that would be wonderful. Encourage others in the community to volunteer or just to sign up for this really important program. Encourage the residents to do that. And then just know that the Red Cross is there when somebody needs you or when you need us. So we're there to support. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but really excited and just happy for this partnership and opportunity.
Any questions or comments from the board? No? We have a proclamation. Mr. Canty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Proclamation reads, whereas home fires take 7 lives each day in the United States, most often in homes without working smoke alarms, and whereas the American Red Cross is working to sound the alarm nationwide to help reduce the number of deaths and injuries from home fires. Sound the Alarm is a signature event that is part of the Home Fire Campaign, a campaign to make homes safer through free smoke alarm installations and home fire prevention education. The program is available all year throughout Massachusetts. And whereas last year nearly 5,300 people in Massachusetts lost everything to devastating home fires, and the American Red Cross was there to help. In southeastern Massachusetts alone, Red Cross volunteers responded to 178 fires and provided nearly $289,000 of financial assistance and recovery casework to nearly 500 families. And whereas smoke alarm installations have already saved more than 2,000 lives across the country since the campaign launched in 2014, and whereas the American Red Cross will install 100,000 free smoke alarms nationwide in high-risk communities and help families create escape plans as part of 2024 Sound the Alarm. And whereas today, May 4th, 2024, the American Red Cross is joining together with the Plymouth Fire Department and Plymouth Emergency Management and local partners to sound the alarm, to install free smoke alarms and make more than 50 households safer from the threat of home fires in the town of Plymouth. Now, therefore, the chair of the Select Board of Plymouth will hereby proclaim May 4th, 2024 to be American Red Cross Sound the Alarm Day in the town of Plymouth. We urge all residents in Plymouth to join us in saving lives and making homes safer from devastating home fires in the town of Plymouth.
Excellent. Thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate that.
We have a motion from the board.
I would make a motion to adopt the proclamation text as read.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Helm. Discussion? Mr. Blitzer?
I vote yes.
Mr. Helm?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes. And on behalf of the town, Ms. Scott, and I'd like to present you with a commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to take the cans appointments next, so we're going to take it out of order. And we'll go right to the water after that. So, is Connor Carlin in? Would you like to say anything or make any comments?
Yes. Come here.
You got to come up to the microphone and Identify yourself and make sure the green light's on, sir.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Connor Carlin. Moved to Plymouth in about 2003. 3 children here going through the school program since the start of Hedge. My eldest now is graduating from Plymouth North. I have worked mostly in the private sector as well as developing some curriculum for sustainable development at Babson College when I was in the MBA program there. And probably for the last 10 or 12 years, I've been heavily involved in the plastics industry, specifically with recycled materials and the sustainable development of different types of bio-based polymers. The possibility to join locally here within Plymouth is an approach I'd like to focus on instead of always having to focus on broader industry approaches to what is a mega trend in terms of sustainability. So doing it locally, I think is very important, and I think the expertise I've gathered both here and internationally will be relevant and hopefully be able to contribute to the program. Thank you.
Any questions? Mr. Canty?
Thank you, Mr. Carlin. So we have a number of, there are 4 openings, but they're not all for the same length of time. There's a 1-year term, a 2-year term, and 2 3-year terms. Do you have a preference, if you were to be appointed to the CANS committee, to which of those positions you are looking to fill?
I prefer the 1-year appointment at this time.
And why is that?
Just being able to determine the amount of time I could commit to it for the foreseeable future. 1 year would be a little bit easier than 3 years at this time.
Okay. Do you have any concerns about your ability to contribute during the year? Because we are fortunate to have, at least from the paperwork, a number of qualified candidates, more than there are positions. So if you do have any concerns about your ability to commit the time, now would be the time to express that.
No, not at this point for that 1-year term.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Blitzer.
Mr. Carlin, you have a good resume, a great resume, just like the other folks here. I got a question for you. The environment is very important, but we also need some commercial economic development in Plymouth. And do you have a plan to be able to work with our light industrial manufacturing businesses that hopefully we're going to get coming to Plymouth to help us with that commercial tax base? Because I believe that we have to work together. There's people in the community that believe that there should be no more development, and I just don't think that's the case. We need commercial development to help us sustain our residential taxes. So you think you'll be able to work with those industries?
I do. I mean, I don't have a plan at this point in time to be able to give you, but I can tell you from experience that there are a number of business cases and examples and case studies and testimonials that actually do prove that companies that are engaged in sustainable manufacturing, for example, or sustainable business models can show and prove that they can reduce their greenhouse gas emissions while also improving their revenue and creating jobs.
Right. We call it smart development.
Absolutely.
So, okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Bob Cook here? Yes. Would you like to come up to the podium and make sure the green light's on? Identify yourself, please.
Here we go, green light. Yeah, my name is Bob Cook, and I'm here to apply for the Net Zero Committee. And the only reason I really had an interest in it is because a lot of years, going back to 2009, when LED lighting came out, energy efficiency was a big thing, conserving energy. And so I jumped on the bandwagon and really got involved in really educating the residential and commercial businesses about saving energy. And what's needed and not building coal plants and stuff like that. So early on, that was sort of what I've done over the last 10 years. And also, I got involved with electric vehicle charging stations. I did a lot of work very early on when charging stations were not even known. Most people didn't even know. In fact, in Plymouth here, I think I was the one that was instrumental in meeting with the folks at the old town hall to get EV chargers in here, the charge point units. So that kind of background is where I come from. So I did get involved with businesses that have worked on net zero buildings in Washington, D.C., for instance, because I would come out of the lighting industry, is primarily my background. So I do know electrical and especially lighting control, stuff like that. And so I retired, over the last year and a half, and I thought maybe, get involved with something that I had an interest in, and so here I am.
Any questions from the board?
I have Harry.
Mr. Canty, then Mr. Blitzer?
Thank you, Mr. Cook. So I'm going to ask you the same question I asked the prior applicants. We have a number of positions. We have one one-year term, one two-year term, and two three-year terms. Do you have a preference if you were to be appointed as to which of those positions you would be appointed to?
I would prefer 1 year. I do teach at the college level, so I have a little bit more of a commitment, so I didn't want to over-commit. So I thought at least for the first year to see how it goes, I think would be good.
What do you believe would be, do you have any concerns about your ability to do the job during that one-year term based on the other obligations you've referenced?
Not at this time. Is there anything, in terms of commitment, is there anything that I should be aware that will I have to meet so many times in a period of, I'm not quite sure what the requirement would be.
So the requirements to serve on a town committee, generally speaking, would be that the expectation would be that you make the majority of the meetings. If technically under the charter, if you miss more than 50% of the meetings in a rolling 12-month period, you're automatically removed from that position, which we would hope not. But 50% is certainly a rather low bar as well, so we're hoping for significantly higher attendance than just 50%. I think they have some regular meetings. They may have some meetings that come up unexpectedly as well. I imagine there's probably Zoom components if you're not physically there. So those could help you make those attendance. But I don't know obviously even to attend a Zoom meeting, you'd need to have that time of day free. So is that something that you think would be achievable?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Blitzer?
Mr. Cook, how you doing? I was involved with the PGDC years ago, and we put those EV stations in.
Oh, okay.
We're the ones that paid for that, and PGDC oversees the parking program in Plymouth. And it took a little while, but they really took off, and it's become very successful. In fact, I think they're putting more in, and we've put more in since then. But it's been a very successful program, so I'm glad you were part of that. So if you work with Mr. Farah?
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
All right, so that's good experience. He's a good man, and
yes.
He's very important to this community, as well as that program. The question I have is working with the private sector, working with businesses to work together for smart development. Is that something you're able to do? It's being open-minded and be able to work with the businesses to make Plymouth have sustainable development.
Oh, absolutely. And as I mentioned, I have a very strong interest and passion for seeing that. Because, again, going back to my background, I work with a lot of waterfront businesses. For instance, a lot of restaurants in places like that. We did a lot of, the new energy-efficient lighting and things like that. So all my career, I worked with businesses to work to encourage folks, especially when we got into, when this whole thing with energy efficiency started, in 2009, 2010, there was a lot of education. So absolutely, that's all we did.
That's big. Education is very important.
Absolutely,
and,
huge.
And I know there's all kinds of funding out there to help businesses too, to
Yes.
become energy efficient. So your knowledge would be helpful with that too. So anyway, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Derek, did you want to say something to when they meet? I thought, no?
No, I was just going to reference the chairman of the CANS committee here, Mr. Bryan, and also our staff support, Mr. Michael Cahill, is here as well, who's our climate resiliency planner, and I'm sure they can answer any questions specifically about the frequency of the meetings and how long those last for.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
William Fitzgerald?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Select Board. My name is Will Fitzgerald. It's been a little over a month since I was here last, and in a different capacity, applying for one of the open positions on the Climate Action Net Zero Committee. I've been a volunteer on environmental issues even before I moved to Massachusetts and before I moved to Plymouth, specifically with the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy on Cape Cod and also Whale and Dolphin Conservation based in Plymouth. These marine conservation organizations have been really crucial as part of my education in terms of interacting with community members, meeting them where they are, helping to educate them on crucial issues impacting their environment, and also the changing climate and its impact on those species and us. We're in a very rapidly changing world, and organizations like that are crucial in terms of educating folks and helping communities build their resilience to the challenges that they face. I intend to take that experience, coupled with my legal background, as well as my experience in executive communications and corporate communications for two of the largest employers in Massachusetts, to make the Climate Action Net Zero Committee a real force for positive change in Plymouth. Thank you.
Questions from the board? Mr. Canty, then Mr. Blitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. So I have the same question that I've asked to the prior two applicants. So we have a one-year term, one 2-year term, and 2 3-year terms that are up for appointment this evening. If you were to be appointed to one of those positions, do you have a preference as to which one you would be appointed to?
I do not have a preference. I'm here to serve.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Hi, Mr. Fitzgerald, how you doing? Same question. I have a working together for Plymouth is what my mantra is, and working together with both sides, environmentalists, business people, to make Plymouth energy efficient and do smart development. I just want somebody open-minded that's able to work with both sides. So, and if that's something you can do, I would be able to support you.
Yeah, that's definitely something I'd be willing to do. One of the more fascinating developments that I've witnessed in pharma and biotech is a sustainability plan is a key value proposition for companies looking to secure business. Their clients are looking for that commitment, and they're also looking for the commitment to be backed up into actions that are substantiated by data. So that is something that I've helped with my previous company, and that's something that I'd look to include as part of the process for my work with Plymouth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Mullen?
Hi, thanks. I wanted to share some information with the Select Board that I had shared with Jackie late last week, but I don't think that this made it through. So I'm from here, and I moved back a few months ago, and I've actually been volunteering with CANS for the last couple months. And so what I've offered to do is continue serving as a volunteer as opposed to an appointee, if that's easier for the town. So this is my hometown, and my intention is to stay, but I'm in a rental that's ending soon. And I have family here, and I can stay indefinitely with family, but I thought that it was going to be very straightforward to find a year-round place starting June 1st, and that may or may not be the case. So there's a chance that I won't be living in Plymouth. But again, my intention is to stay here. And I don't know that there's a requirement to be a resident, but I assume that there is, and that would make sense to me. And if I were the town, I would want committees to be run by residents. So there's a question about where I'm going to live, and so I had offered to continue as a volunteer. But having said that, I've been involved with CANS for the last couple months. We have met, I believe, Wednesday nights. There's a lot of the discussion about the upcoming plan that I've been a part of. And again, happy to continue serving in that role as a volunteer. I've worked on climate energy stuff for 20 years now. As I mentioned in my application, two of my main clients are National Department of Energy Lab, the Berkeley Lab, and also one of the largest solar and wind producers in the United States, which is NextEra Energy. So this is an area that I know a lot about, and again, happy to serve happy to sort of, strengthen Plymouth's response to climate.
Question?
Mr. Canty, Mr. Bletzer, then Mr. Mahoney.
Thank you. So is that your desire, is to remain a volunteer and not to go forward with being appointed for now and maybe reapply for a future opening if you're still in Plymouth, or what?
No, I mean, my desire would be to be appointed, but
Okay.
I just wanted to be very upfront about my living situation. Like, I don't want to take up anyone's time and take up a spot on this commission if I'm not going to be living in the town. Now, I suspect I will be, and I suspect the odds are like 95+% that I will be, but I just don't know. And what's different about this is a couple weeks ago, I thought I was going to stay for sure. And then, we couldn't agree on a rent, basically. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you were to be appointed,
yes.
do you have a preference? There's one 1-year term, one 2-year term, and 2 3-year terms. Do you have a preference as to which one you were to be appointed to if you were to be appointed?
Yeah, I mean, my preference would be for the 3-year term.
Okay.
Because, I've already been making time for this. There's a tremendous overlap with this work and the work that I already do. And also, there's a particular work group focusing on vehicle electrification that my name has been sort of tentatively attached to. And so, with some of the near-term actions that have been identified, like there's just a whole work stream of stuff that I'd be happy to be engaged with.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can I anticipate your question?
Yeah. No, I appreciate your honesty.
Yeah.
You were very honest, and I also appreciate your resume. You have a great resume.
Thank you.
And, so once you, and thank you for volunteering too. That's great, which this is a volunteer position anyway too. But if, once you get stabilized where you're going to be living and you get figure out everything, if you don't get appointed tonight, please look for another committee or this committee when it opens, because there's openings a lot, and because you'd be a great fit.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Dan, I just, echoing what Mr. Bletzer just said, I appreciate your honesty and you're willing to participate, and especially even if you don't get appointed or don't live in the community, the willingness to continue to volunteer and participate in discussions.
Thanks.
Still adds value. Thank you.
Yeah, I grew up in 5 towns, but I have like one hometown, so that's why I'm here. Yeah. All set? Thanks.
Thank you. Robin Sidman?
Thank you, Chair and Select Board. Pleasure to be here. My name is Robin Sidman. I'm the founder and executive director of Project Green Schools. I recently moved here about 7 years ago from Mansfield, and Plymouth was my parents' happy place. They lived in White Cliffs for over 20 years, and I now have lived in Pine Hills and raised 2 children through Plymouth Public Schools. One was a captain of the Plymouth North-South hockey team, a girls' hockey team. They both played hockey. They've been involved with theater, environmental studies, and I now live at White Cliffs. Plymouth is home. I plan to be here for a long time, and I would take the long term. I think my background, I have chaired the Commonwealth's Environmental Literacy Plan. Now Maura Healey, Governor Healey, is looking at climate literacy. Several years ago, I chaired the Secretary's Advisory Group for Energy and Environmental Literacy. I've seen those plans. I've seen the intersection of business, government, nonprofit, education. I work at that space. I was a public school teacher for 10 years and then founded my nonprofit organization called Project Green Schools, and we work at the intersection of energy, environment, climate, STEM, and public health. We are a pipeline. We have about 6,500 schools nationally that are active in the organization, and I do have a skill set that I believe would be valuable here, again, in connecting business, city, government, planning. We've worked with U.S. Green Building Council on creating green and healthy schools, healthy environments. I've helped charter schools roll out schools. We've worked with Upper Cape Tech, and it was very cool to see Barbara Cotton, who invited me years ago to be at an Earth Day event while she was there at the Cape Cod Children's Museum in previous roles. I haven't walked from this role. I believe that education is the key to a healthier future. I suffer from environmental health-related illnesses, so we talk about EV school bus, clean school bus. I have advised President Obama's. I have advised President Biden. I have advised Deval Patrick. We're here to put youth in the forefront of this conversation. They are inheriting a complex world, and many of us can identify with cancer, allergies, asthma, and things that take down our immune system. I did help to launch US EPA's under Administrator Reagan's currently this year, the Clean School Bus Program. I have notified the committee of funds that are coming down from DC to our state and to local areas like the Renew Schools program, where $200 million is coming down. There's billions of dollars coming down the pike. I look for nothing but service. I believe in community service, and I'm here to serve my hometown of Plymouth.
Thank you, Mr. Blitzer.
Well, that's you got a great resume, and for everybody at home watching, everybody here tonight, anybody here reporting on what's happening here tonight, you should all be proud to live in Plymouth. We just had five candidates for 4 seats stand up, and very impressive resumes. Five very impressive applicants, and that's what we have here in Plymouth. The volunteerism in Plymouth is second to none. The experience that we get from folks coming to this town, people that have lived here all their lives, but it's second to none, the expert volunteerism that we have. And tonight, all 5 candidates could be appointed to these 4 seats. So I just want to thank every one of you. What I liked about you, Ms. Sibman, is the green schools. We're trying to get all our buildings green, as CAN's coordinator out there will tell you. We're trying to get all our buildings green. You'd be very helpful with that. Plus, I see the grants. You've been involved in grants, and that's something that I know Mr. Brindisi loves grants because it helps with our budget. So you've got a great background, and you're invested in the community. You've only been here 7 years, but you've invested in this community, and I appreciate you standing up here tonight. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Canty?
Thank you. So I'm going to ask the same question I've been asking. So I think you said it in your statement, but just to reiterate. So there's 1 1-year term, 1 2-year term, and 2 3-year terms. I think you stated that you wanted the full term, which I interpreted as being the 3-year term, but just so there's no ambiguity, which of these specific terms would you prefer, were it up to you, if you were to be appointed to this committee?
I think to throw yourself into the work, it could require the 3-year term, and I'm happy to serve in a 3-year capacity, especially when you talk about building and starting these things. These are often multi-year projects, so I'd be happy to see some of this through and be here for 3 years.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no more questions, we'll start calling the votes. Mr. Canty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I took notes as to what people's preferences were as to the terms that we have, since we have 5 applicants for 4 spots, and voting could get complicated. So I would suggest that we handle the seats one at a time, and I can read out who had the preferences, and we could perhaps choose from among those that have self-selected the designated terms of their preference as to what we want to do within those bounds, if that's acceptable. I would start with the 1-year term. Both Connor Carlin and Bob Cook expressed that their preference was for the 1-year term. So I would open it up. Unless there's any further questions from members of the board, I would call for a vote for the 1-year term from amongst Mr. Carlin or Mr. Cook for that particular position, starting with Mr. Blitzer.
I'd like to vote Mr. Carlin for the 1-year term.
Thank you. Mr. Helm?
Mr. Carlin.
Thank you. Mr. Mahoney?
Mr. Collin.
And Mr. Quintal?
Mr. Collin?
And myself also for Mr. Carlin. So Mr. Carlin has been appointed to the 1-year term. We thank both Mr. Carlin and Mr. Cook. As was stated earlier, we were fortunate to have all the applicants be very qualified for these positions. So whether or not anyone doesn't get appointed to any of these particular positions is not a reflection on them, but really a reflection on the qualified list of candidates that were provided. So Mr. Carlin has been appointed to the one-year term and is therefore ineligible for further votes. That would bring us to the, I would suggest we had two members that stated they were interested in the three-year term. We had Mr. Mullen and Ms. Sidmond both expressed interest in three-year terms. There are two 3-year terms up for appointment. Let's go one position at a time. For the first 3-year term, unless there are further questions from members of the board, Mr. Bletzer, who do you vote for the first 3-year term position?
Ms. Sidman.
Thank you. Mr. Helm?
Ms. Sidman.
Mr. Mahoney?
Ms. Sidman.
Mr. Quintal?
Ms. Sidman?
And myself, Ms. Sidman. Ms. Sidman has been appointed to the first of the 3-year terms. That brings us to the second 3-year term. We still have Mr. Mullen, who expressed interest, as well as applicants Bob Cook, who had preferred the 1-year term, and Mr. Fitzgerald, who had no preference. The second 3-year term, Mr. Bletzer, who do you vote for the...
I vote for Mr. Fitzgerald for the 3-year term.
Thank you. Mr. Helm?
Mr. Fitzgerald.
Mr. Mahoney?
Fitzgerald.
Mr. Quintal?
Mr. Fitzgerald?
All right, and I vote for Mr. Mullen. So Mr. Fitzgerald, having secured 4 votes to 1, secures the second 3-year term. All right, so that leaves the remainder, which is the 2-year term that no one stated a specific preference for. We still have Mr. Cook and Mr. Mullen as potential applicants for that particular position. Unless there are further questions, Mr. Bletzer, who do you vote for the 2?
Mr. Cook for the 2-year term.
Mr. Helm?
Mr. Cook.
Mr. Mahoney?
Mr. Cook.
Mr. Quintal?
Mr. Cook?
And I will vote for Mr. Mullen. Mr. Cook has received 4 votes to 1. Mr. Cook has been appointed to the 2-year term. Thank you again to all the applicants. Again, everybody that applied was qualified, and we hope that Mr. Mullen, when another appointment becomes available, if he's still a resident, will apply at that time. Thank you.
Thank you and congratulations. Plymouth Water Division Water Rate Study.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As many of you are aware, over the past 6 months, the DPW Water and Sewer Divisions have been working with our CFO, Lynn Barrett, and also with Raf Tellis, Toby Fetter, who is here with us this evening, to prepare a study of what our proposed water and sewer rates would be in the upcoming fiscal year. As part of the study, we looked at the operation and maintenance costs, the existing debt service, future capital costs, and also funding the stabilization budget as well. In addition, as part of the study, we looked at a potential summer rate to encourage the water conservation. And if you can indulge Mr. Fetter to give you a brief presentation, and then we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coyle.
Good evening. As introduced, my name is Toby Fetter. I'm a senior manager with Raf Tellis. Without further ado, I guess I'll just hop into what's a fairly brief presentation just to bring you up to speed on the process and the findings of our analysis, and then we'll open it up for questions. Okay, so Raf Tellis, just so you know a little bit about the background of the firm. I won't go through all of the details, but we are probably the largest municipal financial advisory firm as a specialty in the nation. We've advised water and sewer utilities that serve more than 25% of the nation on fiscal matters, including things very similar to this, like rates. So moving on. So the overview of the rate study, basically, the purpose is, at its core, is to ensure the long-term fiscal sustainability and viability of the water and sewer enterprise funds. As you, I'm sure, are all aware, here in Plymouth, you run your utilities as enterprise funds, meaning they are, to a large degree, standalone financial vehicles. They're intended to they're intended to self-fund, for lack of a better way of putting it. But with that as the primary directive, we wanted to take a look at alternative rate structures and receive guidance from the town. I know there's, as Mr. Coyne alluded to, there's some questions about summer rates, and we took a look at that. And then also we wanted to take a look at what the impacts would be associated with any of the recommended changes. So just to provide a little bit of background right now, within the industry in general, and these numbers are about 9 months old, but 9 months ago, water rates across the nation were going up by about 5% per year on average, and that's associated with compliance spending and honestly just the growth of the cost of doing business. Sewer is a little bit higher, and as you can see, that's been up on average by about 6% a year, and that's just due to inflationary pressures. It's due in certain communities. It's due to aging infrastructure and the need to reinvest. And also, as I said, it's due to a changing regulatory environment. So that's just the backdrop of sort of the water and sewer industry in general. So financial planning. Basically, the idea in financial planning is we want to include all of the recurring expenses. So I'll pull them all up at once. But basically, it's to take a look at the expenses from the standpoint of operational expenses, from the standpoint of things that can't be changed, existing debt service, and that is, in a lot of ways, it's similar to a mortgage. You've done improvements in the past. You need to pay for those improvements because there's a bond that was issued in order to construct them. And then we need to account for basically the cost of the things that now need to be done and ensure that those costs on an annualized basis are built into the expectations for what we need to raise for revenues. The second piece is really then planning your revenue structure around your actual cost structure and really taking into account the town's financial policies. And that's going to be things along the lines of minimum reserve levels and other policy goals along the lines of water conservation and things along those lines. Some of those are already implicitly included in the rate structures here in Plymouth, and we took a look at all of them as part of the assessment. So, okay, quick point on operating reserves. I will say this: so Plymouth right now has reserves in both of its funds, and that's an excellent place to start. I've seen utilities, many utilities that do not come into a rate study from that position, and oftentimes it can be somewhat more traumatic getting them back onto firm financial footing. But basically, the reserves are important because they give the utility flexibility to deal with unexpected occurrences. Now, from the standpoint of water and sewer utilities, it can be equipment breaking, things along those lines, but really also because of the way that most water and sewer utilities end up billing for service can be things like very wet summers can have a dramatic impact on revenue generation because people use less water if they aren't watering outside, and that obviously then generates less revenue. So, but the reserves really, they give you the ability to manage both unexpected instances of things happening, and then they also give you some flexibility in the way that you need to make rate modifications when you have changes to your basic cost of service, as we're going to be talking about a little bit for Plymouth tonight. And then I will say this, the industry best practices, whether or not that's super applicable to Plymouth, from a community to a community basis, the reserve levels and the targets and the rationale for them can vary very substantially. What I would say is the reserve targets that we used in our
study and which you'll see on some of the charts are quite standard for Massachusetts and in my opinion, appropriate for Plymouth considering the nature and type of the assets that it's in charge of running on both water and sewer sides. So,
Go ahead, John.
I need you to translate the third bullet point for me.
let's go back to it. So industry best practices. So the reason that reserves can vary super substantially. So a classic case here in the Commonwealth.
So I'm looking at higher relative cash balance than the town's general fund.
That's right.
So what are those?
The general or the idea behind that bullet, and I apologize, I didn't know which portion of it you were speaking to. The dependability of general fund revenues being largely dependent on taxes is usually more secure than water and sewer revenues, which are based upon a prospective expectation for billing in the coming fiscal year. And so generally speaking, it is prudent to have slightly higher reserve levels to be able to account for things like what I alluded to, the wet summer impact.
So as a percentage?
Yes.
Okay.
As a percentage.
Thank you.
Okay. So jumping right into where things stand. So what you'll see on the chart, and all of the charts that you're seeing tonight are within the draft report that's been issued to the town and is available, and in my opinion is ready to be finalized as long as there aren't comments or additional analyses that the board would like to have included. But what you can see there in the stacked bar format are the expenses. And the black line across that goes horizontally across the chart, that is your existing revenue stream. And as you can see on the water side, over the coming 5 years, you're going to be running expense levels that are significantly above your existing revenue streams. That's the revenues that you get from your existing rates. Okay, so just want to set the expectation. And this chart actually. The zero line is right in the middle, of course. The red dotted line is what we would expect a reasonable level of reserves would be for the water utility. And the bars are what we project with your existing rates, your year-end fiscal reserves will be. And as you can see, 2 years out, you go negative from where we stand right now if we don't make a rate modification. That's based on, as I said, that's based on the expectations for cost of operations, existing debt service, and capital investment that needs to be made in the systems. Similarly on sewer, although to a somewhat lesser degree, you can see your revenues are going to underrun what we project for expenses. Now, what you will note here that's a little bit different from the water side is in the stacked bar format, the yellow bar at the top, that's really the cost associated with capital investments that are included in our assessment. And so there are improvements that need to be made to the wastewater infrastructure. We've included those in our assessment, and using those existing cost estimates of what that's going to, what that's actually going to mean to the wastewater utility and how you're going to fund it. The combination of those two lead us to these being your actual expenses in the fiscal year. And again, very similar to the water. Not as dramatic, but persistent shortfalls. And that simply, the negative slope on the line there as you watch the reserves is simply a function of the fact that the expense stacked bars are higher than the expected revenues from your existing rates. And so really the rationale for these slides is just to let you know there's a real reason we need to talk about rates from the standpoint of the next 5 years. And so going from what we expect of your existing rates to what we would recommend on the water side, the black line now represents what we are including for our recommendation for revenues. Again, against the stack bar expense. As you can see, we basically are increasing pretty substantially, and it's about 9% a year for the first 4 years, I believe. And the goal there being to stabilize the fiscal situation in the water utility and rebuild some of the reserves that you saw in earlier slides that had been somewhat depleted, you might say. Now, this is a replication of the earlier slide, and you will note in the box at the top right, what you can see here is with the changes that we recommend in the prior slide and the 9% increases that we're discussing, you still are going to end up for the first couple of years with reserve levels that are below what is generally the reserve target here in Plymouth. And you will note, obviously, also at the end that you go significantly above that level. Again, when we're setting rates for a multi-year period, it's better to, in my estimation, professional estimation, it's better to make sure that we can pay the bills and not run a negative balance this year, because in an enterprise fund here in the Commonwealth, if you have a negative balance, that will bring DOR, and I don't speak for DOR, let me be explicit on that, but we'll bring attention from DOR as they examine the books, and something to avoid if it can be. But in the out years on the water side, in all likelihood, you will be able to drop off the 9% annual rate increases simply because you'll see you will have built your reserves up to an adequate level and you don't need them to keep going up at that rate. Okay? On the wastewater side, again, this is similar to the water. You know, we basically have a new recommended rate picture or a recommended revenue number, and that's the black line that now closely tracks what we expect for expenses, and where the wastewater was in a bit better shape from the standpoint of current cash flows and whatnot. We're able to track those significantly more closely, and this is basically the reserves picture that comes out of our recommended financial plan for the wastewater side. And as you can see, we drop a little bit under the recommended reserves in the first year, but really over the course of the following 4 years, we're basically right at the recommended level. And that's really the goal here. The important thing to recognize about water and sewer rates is there's not, no one's making money. We're just trying to make sure that the town is adequately collecting the revenues needed to provide a critical public service for each of these utilities. So what are the modifications? So basically, the one of the first things that we would recommend, having looked at your existing rate structure, you have a 4-tier inclining rate block structure right now where the second and third tier prices are actually very close together. And it doesn't eliminate, but it very much minimizes the price signal that you generally is one of the primary reasons you use an inclining rate block structure. And I don't know exactly what the process was by which you got to the existing relative differentials, but they're reviewed in the report. And essentially, what we're saying is let's get back to a more regimental and standardized differential between the different rates, between the different block structures. And so that's one of the first things that we would recommend is just to make sure you're setting an appropriate price signal. The second piece, obviously, all of the recommendations that we make are intended to basically fully fund your operations, your existing debt service, and the needed capital that is being planned by both utilities right now, and building and maintaining your reasonable reserves. The fourth bullet is about modification of the fixed charges. Now, here in Plymouth, as you know, on the water side, you have fixed charges that are associated with the various meter sizes. The American Water Works Association actually has recommendations as to what the relative differential should be between various meter sizes, and it's based on the capacity of those connections. And so it's an industry standard, and so we have incorporated those industry standards into some of the charts you're going to be seeing a little bit later. But long story short, right now you do charge more for larger meters than for a 5/8-inch meter, which is a standard residential connection, but you charge a lot less for, say, a 2-inch meter in comparison to the 5/8-inch meter, meaning the differential between the sizes, than what the American Water Works Association would recommend and has as a standard differential. So that's what that bullet is alluding to. So after we make those modifications within the financial model, as I said earlier, we're looking at about 9% rate increases on the water side, and that is that's really dual purpose. Part of it is right now the water fund is likely to run shortfalls more so than the sewer fund is, and so we need to recoup revenue that honestly we preferably would have been collecting this year with higher rates. So we need to play a little bit of catch up as well as pay for capital. And on the wastewater side, the recommendation is 5% increases. And that's a blend of just the expected cost of doing business increasing. Our escalation in the model is around slightly more than 3% based on a blend of factors for the overall cost of operations. And then tack on to that capital investments that are needed in wastewater as well. And just to state clearly, both of these plans together include around $65 million of investment included in the numbers that we're reviewing and included in the rates. So if the board elects to go with the rates that are recommended in our report, then by definition, you're setting yourself up to be able to afford the capital investments that the utilities expect they're going to need over the course of the next 5 years.
Number two, future capital infrastructure investments. So,
yes.
Are we going off? Was it 5 years or 10 or?
It's a 5-year plan. We have some things that are further out, but the rate recommendations, as you saw, whenever you do financial modeling, of course, there are some assumptions that you need to make, and usually making assumptions for things longer than 5 years on rates it leaves open many factors to impact. For example, if your community grows more strongly than is anticipated in the rates, you need lower rate increases, generally speaking, because, for example, if you were to add 1,000 homes, they end up generating additional revenue, but the fact of the matter is the cost of providing the water to 1,000 extra homes might not be quite as high as if it's not as if you would need to put in, for example, if you didn't need to put in a new source per se. You end up being basically cost accretive on new accounts. So if you grow more quickly than we assume, your rates can come down. If you invest less in infrastructure, the rate recommendations can come down. That's really why we recommend at least taking a look 2 to 3 years out and see, okay, how well are we tracking to plan? Because there are things whenever you do this type of financial projections that you simply can't tell the future. 5 years ago, none of us expected what ended up going on with the financial impacts to utilities from COVID. So I think that's all hand.
Mr. Helm? Yeah, Harry next. Yes. And Charlie. I'm not surprised to hear that embedded in this is a capital improvement plan, because I noticed that the borrowing goes up over those years, and that's usually a telltale signal that somebody wants to spend money on capital. Are you, during this presentation, going to tell us what this 5-year plan is and how much is it going to cost?
So as I said,
is that part of this presentation?
It's not part of this presentation, no, but it is outlined or is detailed in the report. So I don't know, Peter, would you like to speak to any of that? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I'm just not going to be able to speak to that.
So we actually gave Ralph Tellis our 10-year capital plan. Between Doug and I think, like you said, we have about $65 million worth of capital improvement projects. I think at the end of the paper version of this, you have that 10-year plan is in there. But as Toby's saying, this rate study is built into a 5-year rate structure, and so it doesn't go out quite as far as the 10 years. It won't cover the entire capital plan.
But it does for the next 5 years. So the capital planning, I think, is it's a separate technical exercise. They do a capital plan around what the technical needs are of the utility. We do a financial plan around what we think the amount of revenue you need to raise in order to fund each of the years is. So is that adequate in description?
It's a response. Thank
you. Okay.
Mr. Blitzer?
Sally?
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. I got a couple things for you, and then something for Mr. Good and Mr. Coyle, but is this something we should have done years ago, a few years ago? Is this, we could have prevented? This at 9% seems to be a pretty steep. The average, you said is 5%.
Right,
We're almost double.
As I alluded to, on the water side, indeed, you are going to be playing a little bit catch-up for the next couple of years. You know, when in the model itself, which does project out longer than 5 years, we do show the ability to be able to drop off from the 9% level. The issue is, if one of the primary interests is making sure that the enterprise funds stay financially sustainable, right? Because in the Commonwealth here, when you adopt the enterprise funds, you know, the backstop to that is the town general fund. And so most towns want to very much make sure that the enterprise funds remain self-funding because it keeps it away from the town general fund and satisfies DOR. So,
and I say that because, you know, we're trying to be a proactive board, and we keep getting hit with 6.9% real estate tax increase. This could possibly be 9%, depends on what we vote. It's just you know, and the taxpayers are going to get frustrated with this. So it's just something that it's really it's hard to digest right now, that 9%. But one thing that you said, and we've had this year a substantial amount of rain. Last year we had rain every weekend last summer. So there's been the last couple of years a substantial amount of rain, and you said that basically you said conservation is not good for revenue. People aren't watering their lawns, and at some point, and I'm not saying this is the way to go. I don't quote me on this, but if we increased the revenue through people watering their lawns, if the water is there, is that something that could help us? Would that make a difference?
It would. And honestly, we got onto questions before I was quite done with the
obviously,
presentation.
I'd have to know how strong our water is. Can we handle people watering their lawn? And maybe that will help with the revenues. So it's and also the 9%. Maybe Lynn can do that behind you. She can answer what's that? How will that affect the homeowners, the average homeowner? Would a 9% water increase?
So I think Toby includes an example that he'll get to, but I just wanted to make a couple of comments regarding Selectman Helm's questions and yourself. So in the written report, the 35-page report that you got as part of your packet last week, that includes the 10-year capital plan for both sewer and water. It's also the same 10-year capital plan that we have been working with the board and with our capital improvements committee and our building committee. You know, it's the same plan that we've been working on. Last year, when we came to you, we had to make an adjustment in the water rates because it's very capital intensive, the water and sewer department, and we've done a really good job over the years of maintaining each of those enterprise funds and having them be independently sufficient, with revenues that we collect. But we knew that we had a lot of capital in the future, and that was one of the reasons why we wanted to have this sort of 5-year study to sort of look at, okay, what do we need to do? And Toby's right. I mean, we've used some of our water retained earnings for some of that capital infrastructure that we've done in the past year, so that's why the retained earnings balance has gone down. Last year, I believe we had almost a 9% increase in the water rates, and I understand that that's challenging and difficult for some people, but I know that changing the the rate structure that he had recommended, you know, sort of increasing the difference between the levels of our block rates, I think is going to help some residential customers in the analysis. So hopefully he'll go over that.
Sure. And thank you, Lynn. So to her point, she's exactly correct. With some of the changes that we were envisioning, with the change to the rate block structure and the change to the multipliers to the American Water Works standards, what you can see on the board right now is that actually for your average residential user with a 5/8-inch charge, their bill's going to go down in the first year from what it would have been, even with the rate increase. And that's simply because their fixed charge is going to drop, because we don't change the amount of revenue that we're intending to collect from fixed charges, but we reallocate it appropriately to the larger connections. And so the average quarterly bill on a 5/8, meaning the connection charge, the fixed fee portion of the bill for a 5/8-inch meter, if you make that adjustment, will go down pretty substantially, actually. And will still generate the same amount of revenue because you're allocating higher charges to the people with really large meters. And so what you can see there on the right-hand chart is what we would expect would be the bill there in the center if you make that change. And so the impact of the 9% increases, while you're correct, they are, so it's a fairly large number for something that's going to be done, for a number of years in a row. The fact of the matter is, some of the other changes that are being considered in order to align Plymouth with industry standards will have the opposite impact, because they will realign where the revenue is actually generated. And so you can see there on the table for your typical residential customer here in Plymouth what the bills would be under the existing and under what we've recommended as the new rate structure. And again, this is all laid out in the report as Lynn indicated.
Mr. Canty?
I guess I don't fully understand the two tables to the left. So they both list a percentage increase.
Yes.
Water 9%, sewer 5% in both, right?
Yep.
And the top one, the AWWA fixed charges and tier differential, you see underwater a 7-cent increase in a quarterly bill and a 9% increase and a $23.33 reduction despite a 5% increase.
That's right. So that's because their quarterly bill includes two components. A fixed charge, which on both sides will be shrinking, the sewer side by more, because on sewer right now you don't have, regardless of the size of connection, you charge the same flat fee. So whether you're a small home or a large apartment complex right now in Plymouth, your fixed charge is the same. Now your meter charge is slightly different, but it's not as different as the American Water Works Association indicates it probably should be. Okay. And so even after you make the 9% increase, when you combine the fixed charge and the change in volumetric on water, your bill for the average homeowner goes up by 7 cents a quarter. Okay. But on sewer, when you're talking about the combined bill on sewer, because the fixed charge is going to drop significantly, your sewer charge for the average homeowner goes down by about $20 a quarter. So
then, is the second chart, the lower chart, option 2, that's keeping the fixed charges static?
That's correct. Keeping your existing system. The bottom table is if you don't make these changes
to fixed charges, but you still did make the differential change.
That's correct.
Okay.
So, and then...
All right, thank you.
Were you referring to these two?
Yeah.
Okay. So these are the actual rate recommendations. I wasn't necessarily going to show them, but these are what are included in the actual report. These are the new tables. And, what you can see is the volumetric changes, changed by the percentage we're talking about, but the minimum charges have significant differentials if you adopt the AWWA standard as has been recommended. And so We have two. Obviously, the presentation is now public record, so you're free to review these. I'm happy to talk about it. But again, what you would notice is the fixed charges for the small meters either go down slightly or don't go up very much. And for the larger meters, the fixed charges go up pretty significantly. And that's concurrent with a change in the volumetric rates.
Okay.
But I do want to reiterate one thing. One of the big changes, especially on the water side, is your second and third tier water rates had gotten quite close to each other, and so there wasn't a price signal anymore. And we have, as part of these recommendations and all the numbers you see, we've reestablished a price signal between those two. And I think I'm operating from memory here, but we actually did the analysis of the percentage of residential customers who actually go beyond the second tier, and it's very small. I think it was to the tune of 18% of bills. Was it 18%? Might have been 8% of bills. I apologize. I can look that up and actually forward it to Lynn or Peter, and I'm sure, again, there's a chart in the report that actually has a narrative that tells you what the percentages are who would be impacted in the various tiers.
Okay.
One question.
Sir.
Is the size, is that on your water bill, the size of
the size of the meter?
Yeah. So how, if a homeowner wanted to get a smaller pipe, how does that work?
The general rule of thumb, and I can't speak for Plymouth exactly on this, but generally speaking, the meter size in the water industry is determined to some degree by fire department requirements and local building codes. And so it's really,
So basically, to simplify it, so what you have is what you get. Is that what it is? Okay.
By and large, yes.
Okay.
No, I don't speak for Plymouth as far as policy
Mr. Gordon,
goes.
I don't.
I just want to make a comment towards that. So the number of customers that are in the ranges of say the 2-inch to the 10-inch, are very little. They're not, there's not a huge amount of them. We can give you those numbers too as to how many customers fall within those ranges. We don't have it tonight, but we can certainly send it to you. And we're not asking you to make a decision tonight either. We're asking you to look at the report, look at the recommendations, sit on it for a week or two, and then we're going to come back and ask you to vote rates. So then if you have feedback or you have questions, by all means, get that out to us, and we'll try to answer your questions so that you can make, an informed decision on those rates. Okay.
You finished?
I guess I am. I'm happy to answer as many questions as arise.
No, exactly. Questions from the board, Mr. Canny?
So I noticed in the on page 33 of the materials of the report that's in our materials for the packet.
Yes. Summer rates.
I noticed that the summer rates are talked about as sort of theoretical, but then up there, the summer rates were included, it looked like, in your rate recommendation.
We include them as a hypothetical because we were requested to. I mean, generally speaking, the way we approach the summer rates here in Plymouth, number one, when you put on a summertime rate, there can be an unknown impact on demands. And so the way that we approached it in Plymouth was to basically add in a premium on higher usage in the 3-month period for summers. Based on historical billing records, if you were to institute the premium as outlined in the report, it's going to generate probably an additional $250,000 to $300,000 in revenue per summer, with the key goal or the primary goal being providing yet another cost, sort of signal of let's conserve water. Mm-hmm. That's the rationale for it, and the most effective policy way of actually instituting that, other than a water ban, which is in no one's interests, is using something like a summertime rate. But until we understood the degree to which that impacted consumption, meaning the degree to which adoption of a rate along the lines of that would actually change people's usage patterns, it's very difficult for us to make a prediction about what the fiscal impacts are of that type of policy. And so we haven't included in the recommendation the use of a summertime rate. It's really sort of a, here's what we think you should expect to receive for additional revenues. And quite frankly, I don't know what kind of suppression of summertime demand you would see using it. But it is, you know, the expectation based on historical billing records is that type of policy would generate some additional revenue, which you could use to further conservation efforts or, you know, pay for another portion of your capital program.
So you're assuming that if we instituted a summer rate, we wouldn't also be putting restrictions on the use, that the restrictions would go away because of the rate increase? Is that
that is the assumption, yes.
But with the way that our billing goes, they wouldn't know they're paying more for the water so as to restrict it until they've already spent they've already watered it.
If you were to adopt the summertime rate as part of your normal rate adoption process,
right?
Pardon me, noting that there would be a separate rate structure for the summertime months, then my thought would be people would have been notified, but that's, you know, I'm not an attorney, so meaning if you adopt a summertime rate or a set of rates that includes a summertime rate,
right?
By the adoption, you've let people know what their water will, or how their water will be billed in the summertime. And the summertime rate is purely on the consumption piece, the volumetric portion of the bill. It's not, has nothing to do with the the fixed charge portion of the bill.
But there are, I mean, part of the reason that we do the ban to restrict it is for the public safety implications of not having, you know, so if people, say the first year we do this, if they decide they'd rather water at will and pay whatever they have to pay, there could be some unintended consequences there.
Well, let me clarify. So the revenues and the rates are based not on an assumption of a change in demand patterns. So if you've been using a summertime ban on people to a certain extent, right now that is baked into all these rates. It's part of the calculations. We wouldn't have any way, if you were to take off a summertime ban, we wouldn't have any way of making a prediction about what your water use would go to. And so that's not included. So basically the rate model and the revenue generation component is based on historical demand patterns over the course of the past 5 years. And so in the past 5 years, if you've been using a form of ban in the summer, the rates that we're recommending assume the inclusion of that same, of a similar policy going forward.
I believe we've had a ban, if not all 5, then at least for most of that 5. Could we get clarification as to that, just because?
Absolutely. So every year, from May 1st till September 30th, we have to institute seasonal watering restrictions. That's part of our Water Management Act permit conditions. We asked Toby and Raftelis to take a look at the seasonal rate as a recommendation from the Water Conservation Committee, who was interested in trying to, further conservation.
Right.
And that was the driving purpose behind us taking a close look at it. There's no way around it. It's kind of expensive to use more water in the summertime if you want to use it for irrigation. But as a driver, we're looking at it from a conservation angle.
And have we been banning it from starting on that May 1st date for at least the last 5 years?
Longer than that, actually. Every year we put these restrictions in place. One thing about these restrictions is they're very difficult to police.
Right.
We advertise as best we can. We get the word out there, and we hope that people do the right thing. They don't.
Understood. But you do what we can, yes. Thank you.
So following up on that question from Kevin, we heard that conservation actually hurts revenue. Are we sufficient enough to be able to let people water and not have a ban? Is that something that we don't need to do this summer and see how that works as far as increasing revenue?
Are you asking if we have the capacity for people to water their lawns?
Yes, I'm asking that. I'm not saying to do it, but I'm saying it might be a way, if it's going to be significant revenue, it might be a way of helping out with that, with some of these capital projects.
Absolutely. So we do have the capacity for people to water their lawns. It would be nice to be able to not have to pump that water, or to be able to pump that water and store it for fire protection, rather than putting it all over lawns. And
But is it worth at least taking a shot? And if it gets to, then you can put the ban in effect.
so the ban goes into effect.
It's a
regardless.
suggestion, that's all. I'm just thinking about,
Okay, yeah. Yeah, the ban is part of our water permit, our Water Management Act permit. It goes into effect every year. We have no choice.
so we couldn't,
So let me rephrase that.
I saw the study, and it
Yeah.
said that conservation is hurting our revenue.
So we call it a ban, but it's not a ban per se. They're seasonal watering restrictions, so it limits how much and what you do with the water
Right.
outdoors during the months from May to September.
No, I know exactly what it is,
Okay.
believe me. But it's something, I don't know if we could consider doing it, but anyway.
I guess Mr. Gordon might be able to help with this answer, or you might be able to answer this question. We're hitting upon increased water rates in the summer, water bans, all that stuff, and it calls to mind that we received a number of recommendations from our water conservation committee. Were these requests factored into this report and into all of these numbers?
So the only factor, I think, the only one of the recommendations from the Water Conservation Committee that was factored into this report was the summer rate. The other two of the three primary recommendations that they gave were not part of this rate study. I believe one of them was a full-time employee to study conservation data, and the other one escapes me right now, but it was not part of the study.
So in other words, the main suggestion that was incorporated was the summer rate.
Seasonal rate.
Of the seasonal rate. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Our retained earnings could actually be used to lower rates, but we choose to use them for capital projects. Is that correct?
Partially. The problem with using all your retained earnings, and I've seen utilities do this, is if you get into the practice of doing that, subsidizing rates with your retained earnings, by definition, you have rates that are insufficient to generate the revenue of the utility, and eventually that well runs dry, and oftentimes far more quickly than people expect.
What is our fund balance in the water account right now and sewer?
Yeah, it's at least $500,000 right now. We just went to town meeting, and we had a small project that we paid for out of retained earnings. So I'm not sure what the exact, I think prior to that it was around $800,000, but it's probably around $500,000 or $600,000 right now.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? John?
Yeah, through the chair to the town manager or the finance director, Derek Lynn had mentioned maybe coming back for a vote on this issue in a week or two, or is it truly that soon? Or are we going after the election, late May, early June, or?
I think initially we were thinking it would come back in May when we typically set water and sewer rates. But I believe the next iteration of bills have to go out in May. So we're thinking at the latest, we'd want to come back for a vote on April 30th at the deadline, right?
Yeah, so because Selectman Blitzer referred to, if we were going to be instituting a summer rate, or if we were going to be doing the 9% increase on water and the 5% increase on sewer, we want to notify all the water and sewer customers. So we would most likely do that in the fourth quarter bill that we mail out in May, that's due the end of May. So we wanted to have the vote, put an insert in the bill to let people know starting in July, that first quarter bill for fiscal 25 would include these new rates, So hopefully on the 30th, April 30th, that you would be prepared to take a vote.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Canty?
So are we, I guess the last answer I received on this was that it was theoretical, but are we anticipating that the seasonal water rates will be part of the recommendation at that time, or that will be up to the board to put that in the, as?
Right now, the rates that have been calculated and documented in the report do not include the need for a summertime rate. That's a policy decision, and it wouldn't be our place to recommend that or not. So right now, the rates that are included in the report, we're confident will generate the revenue that you need over the course of the next 5 years, but they don't depend on passing the summertime rate premium for summer watering.
So included in the 35-page report is the information about the summer rate.
Yes.
So if the board had an interest in doing that, by all means, we would work with you on recommending a summer rate. And I think to go back to what Mr. Bledsoe was getting at, I think as part of the regulations, the town already has a seasonal, restriction on watering. And I think the summer rate is just another tool in your toolbox to encourage conservation.
Yes, I understand. I just, when we're voting on it, I mean, if we're voting on it with the intention of potentially voting it on it at that time frame to have a summer rate, I would hope that we would get, like, option one would be the recommended rate with no summer increase to meet the 5-year plan, and option two would be that plus the summer rate, so we know what those numbers, and then we could make whatever determination we're going to make.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just,
Mahoney?
and Lynn, building on what Kevin just said, breaking down the 4 different tiers and just extrapolating that out, summer rate versus non-summer rate and how it just affects all those different categories. And I'll probably be by to sit down for 5 or 10 minutes to go over this, okay? But I'll warn you ahead of time.
Well, we have some time between now and then, so we can look at these scenarios, would be good. I'm going to ask you what the bare minimum is, at least for the next 2 years. And I'm not going to go into that whole spiel, but I think everybody that's a town meeting member and every resident knows what I'm talking about. And it's not because I'm scared to vote for an increase. That's not my style. What I'm saying is, if we could, is there a possibility we can delay the paying for a year or two, or minimal?
The challenge with delaying, right? So remember, let me get back. That's what happens to your water reserves with no change. So the ability to delay is, I think, limited. Even with the 9% increase, and recall, the 9% is on the overall revenue generation number. The way the model works is, it's not on your average bill isn't going up 9% for your average residential customer. As we just reviewed, the average bill is going up in the first year very, very marginally. The overall revenue number is going up by 9%. And the reason that the average residential bill doesn't is because of the change in the fixed charge allocation that we're recommending that Plymouth adopt. And so within the report, we have new fixed charges and new rates. But from the standpoint of how much the water bill will go up for your average user, the combined water and sewer bill for an average Plymouth residential customer will go down in the first year, even with these rate changes. And that may sound nonsensical, but remember, we're reallocating where we're raising the revenues from on the fixed charges, which lowers the fixed charge on a 5/8 inch, which is 95% or more of the single-family homes in Plymouth have those. So it's the 5/8 inch meters are the vast majority of customers in Plymouth. So I can get you numbers. I believe we already discussed that we will, but I can certainly provide you numbers with how many of each of the meter classes you have. and what the revenues would be generated from. But again, we're shifting some revenue away from small users on fixed charges, and according to industry standards, appropriately reassigning it to the larger customers who place the biggest demands on the system.
When you say replace the smaller users, that would probably be seniors, no?
Generally speaking, yes.
Okay.
Generally speaking, yes. Folks who are living either alone or as a couple without children in a household are amongst usually the smallest users in any system.
Mr. Canty?
So, in terms of, you're talking about a 5-year projection, you're talking about costs, existing and anticipated costs over that projection, raising the rate 9%, and I think earlier was 9% with anticipation that next year would be a 9%, which is not 9% over now, 9% over the year we're setting that already went up 9, so it's stacking, right? So if we delayed by a year, it would be more than an 18% increase on the second year to get back on track.
Just to get back to the same revenue number, that's correct.
Right.
Yes.
So and this is, you're recommending something that spreads it out rather than having be 1 year of nothing, no increase, and then a year of a double increase.
As you actually, I was about to say as you recall from the chart, but I mean what the chart shows you is really the first 3 years is just getting back to true fiscal health on
Right.
the water utility. As you can see, you continue to build significant reserves out in 28 and 29. Those also contain 9% increases. I suspect you won't need to actually institute those. I suspect if you get out to 27, you're going to see that you'll probably perform approximately what we've projected. And if you are, you probably will know that, we don't need another 9% increase this year or next. Maybe we need a 3% on those years. But really the first the first 3 years of the 9% increases are just getting the water utility back to cash flow positive and back towards a healthy reserve level.
So if we wanted to pump the brakes on an increase, your recommendation is that we do it on the tail end, not at the beginning?
That is absolutely my recommendation.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one last question. This might make some people happy and might upset some people, but the majority of homeowners, residential homeowners, have the smaller meters. Is that true?
Yes.
So who has the larger meters? Is it all these new apartment complexes that are being built coming in, and they have all large meters?
So there are some neighborhoods, such as Casabella, if you're familiar with that,
Sure.
that have larger meters. There are some businesses, the prison, the hospitals. It's kind of spread out in some residential, some commercial, some institutional. But, I mean, the larger meters, there may be a dozen of them out there.
But how about these what's that? Oasis. The new apartment, like Oasis, for instance.
So that's somewhere in the middle of the scale that he showed there. Those larger buildings have like 3-inch meters. So there would be some revenue generation shifted onto those rather and away from the residential people.
My last question could be will that hurt us? I mean, a lot of people will be happy to hear that, I'm sure. But will that hurt us in future developments? Will it be significant enough? I don't think it will, but I'm just throwing it out there. I don't think it will, but anyway. So I just wanted people to be aware of this, so thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Water balance program?
If that wasn't enough information for you to digest, we have a little more information on a new program that we are considering. And we just want to present it to you this evening for consideration for us to look at moving forward with this. It's called the Water Balance Program, and Kendra Martin, water and wastewater engineer, has developed a presentation that she'd like to present to you. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So I'm here tonight to present our proposed water balance program. Essentially, the water balance program is a water supply and demand management program aimed at mitigating the water demand from new development. So the purpose of the program, it's a conservation-based initiative to both conserve water usage and mitigate infrastructure expenses throughout the town's water system. You may have heard terms like water bank or water neutral growth. It's essentially the same thing that we're proposing here as part of this program. So how the balance program would work is that applicants would be required to offset their water demand at a 1-to-1 ratio through one of three options. We have applicant-directed conservation, water balance mitigation fee, and a supplemental water supply source, and I'll go through each of those just in a minute. A couple things, the demands would be calculated using Title V regulations, which is in line with how we calculate sewer fees and typical demands through any impact analysis that we do currently. And then we would also require applicants to denote if they're proposing to use any irrigation systems connected to the water supply, and if so, they would be required to offset that demand as well. So the first of the options is applicant-directed conservation. So the applicant would identify and complete water conservation activities at existing water customer locations within the same pressure zone. So they would identify an existing building that has older toilets or shower heads and replace them with low-flow toilets and low-flow plumbing fixtures. Another option is removing irrigation systems that exist within that pressure zone as well. The second option applicants would have is paying a water balance mitigation fee. And this fee would be used for the water department to fund water conservation activities or water infrastructure projects. So the water department would be the one that would actually purchase these low-flow toilets, et cetera, or perform infrastructure improvements that increase capacity, such as upsizing water mains. So we're not pumping any more water, but we're allowing more flow to go through a water main and get into that neighborhood. We're proposing a fee of $10 per gallon per day for anyone who would be using 10,000 gallons per day or less, and that any flow over that 10,000 gallons per day would be at $20 per gallon per day. And then the last option, which we don't foresee being used often, and it would be on a case-by-case basis and is more geared towards applicants that are having a very large demand on the system, would be the supplemental water supply source. So the applicant would help the water department identify and develop or pay for a supplemental water supply, well, et cetera, somewhere within the water zone. This program that we're proposing would apply to all new commercial developments, any new large residential or subdivision project, and then residential properties that are being new residential properties with more than 3 bedrooms. Additionally, any property that is proposing a change in use that results in expansion of their water usage would be required to comply with this program. So if a 3-bedroom house is proposing another bedroom, they would be required to offset that 1 bedroom of 110 gallons per day of usage based off Title V calculations. So this chart just shows that there are other communities that have programs like this in place within Massachusetts and what those options are. You'll see that the Weir River water system is more similar to the program that we're proposing. And then the other towns just use a fee as their mitigation option. For the application fee, we're proposing a $100 application fee. so we can review the applications and help people determine the best option to comply with the program. You can kind of see it's across the board what people charge and how they determine this fee. We worked with a consultant who recommended the rates that we chose for the mitigation fee. And then lastly, I pulled together a summary of some recent commercial and residential developments that came to town, and based off of this program, what their demand would have been required to be mitigated, and if they chose to pay the fee, what that option would have looked like. So you can see that Oasis would have been about $1 million for their water balance mitigation fee. And then the Cape Cod 5 Bank that just went in was $4,200. Again, it's all based off on Title V calculations. So residential is per bedroom. Commercial can be, if it's a doctor's office, is based off the number of doctors. Restaurants is based off of the seating.
And hypothetically, if that had happened, that money ends up in the enterprise fund?
Yes, we were proposing to go straight to the enterprise fund. The funds would be used to fund conservation activities or other infrastructure projects in the water department that are for conservation. So that is our proposed program, if anyone has any questions.
Mr. Helm.
Okay, 3 options. What if I don't want to take part in any of the 3 options? I'm a resident and I don't want to do it.
What type of resident are you? You have a 3-bedroom? Are you part of this program?
I'm a 3-bedroom.
Well, then 3-bedroom, you don't have to comply.
I'm a 5-bedroom.
So I don't know the answer to that question, other than I know that if we make this a program and a policy, they would have to comply.
Yeah, if this was a policy, then we wouldn't issue a building permit to that homeowner.
What if, so in other words, I live in a house that was built in 1930. It has 5 bedrooms. I can just say, please go off on your own.
It's
leave me alone.
if existing residentials don't have to, it's not part of this.
All right,
Yeah.
let's talk about the Oasis here, and they're over $1 million. They're a 40B. Do they have to comply with this policy?
It is our understanding that they do, but we are following up with legal just to confirm on all of that.
Okay, where do you get that, your understanding from? Not to put you on, but I'm just interested how you would determine that.
Because it's not a zoning bylaw, it's so that's what they're exempt. 40B is exempt from a zoning
Exactly,
bylaw,
okay.
so this is not a zoning bylaw.
Okay, all right, cool. And so for a new residence, 5-bedroom. You know, the slide that's the $10, 10,000 way back, one of your first ones. Next one, the next one beyond.
Well, it's the $10 per gallon per day, right? That.
Yeah, no, but it goes, you got a chart on another one. It's the one after, or the one before it. No, I guess not. But there is one where you actually break down all the different levels in a chart.
So I had this one?
Almost.
No, keep going backwards. You'll come to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know I saw it.
That was it.
Okay. All right, I think it was that one you just popped right by. Okay. But anyway, what would be the charge for a 5-bedroom house?
So they would be
$10 gallon per day.
Yep. So the first 3 bedrooms are exempt, so it's
Right.
only charged at the 2 bedrooms. So that's 220 gallons per day based off Title V, and it's times 10. So it would be $2,200.
Per day.
Nope, total fee, because it's the $10 per gallon per day, and their 2 bedrooms is 220 gallons per day.
So it's per day applied to a year. It's a charge for a year.
It's a flat number. So Title V is gallons per day.
Right.
So if a two bedrooms would be $220. 220
Yeah.
gallons per day.
Right.
The charge is $10 per gallon per day. So the gallons per day cross out, and you're left with $2,200 for the one-time fee.
Just one
One-time
time?
fee, yep,
Never again?
never again. Unless they add another bedroom, then we charge them for that other bedroom.
Okay, all right, cool, thank you.
I have a question. What do you use the money for, if it was approved?
So if the money would be used for, I mean, we don't have a set project, but leak detection, if there's a hydraulic restriction somewhere in the system where we can't get enough water through because the pipe is undersized, we could use it for that. We could use the funds. We've talked about the water department purchasing in bulk low-flow fixtures or low-flow toilets, and then having homeowners come and actually take those and get them installed in their house.
So my next question, this is where I'm going with this.
Sure.
Is why, if we would accept some of these recommendations here, why wouldn't we take that money and use it on capital projects on the first presentation we just seen, rather than charging, we'll say, double water rates?
So this is geared towards the new users. The existing users and those rates that they pay, we've had this conversation looking at it as two distinct things. Because we don't, if anyone who's coming into this system is putting an additional demand onto the water system.
Yep.
So this fee we want, and we're identifying that there is an issue with demand right now in some areas, so that the people coming into the system would be required to offset. We don't want to put that burden onto the existing ratepayers. That would be these new developments that would have to be the ones to offset their use.
But in this conversation, we really are, if you really want to split the hairs. So
Well,
I would
to be
support more like, you had Oasis up there, and it was $1 million.
Yep.
I'd like to see that be $2.5 million. Seriously, because these are the projects that are putting the strain on the system. We can laugh all we want, and I'd rather see the seniors be left alone. Because in my eyes, there's no reason why they should have to pay more to subsidize Oasis. And when I say these apartments and these condos, this is the problem. This is where we should be looking. This is what I will support of any number that you bring before me on these kind of projects.
So that's my question. I mean, we just proposed the $10 and the $20. If the board feels that those numbers should be higher, we're absolutely willing to take that back to the table and make those recommendations as well.
I can't speak for the rest of the board. I'm going to speak for myself. And I definitely would, all day long. And, you know, these projects come in, these 40Bs, all of them. This is the problem. You're looking at it right there, minus the bank. I mean, I don't think that's a major one. But all these other places are straining the system, and there's more coming. So, I mean, if you're looking for direction, I'll speak for me and say, look in that direction and leave some of the ratepayers a little bit of relief, if we can. Mr. Canty, and Mr. Blitzer, and John.
So keeping this slide up, so I know the third option was, the third proposed option was for them to be able to locate and assist or pay for the development of a new water source. Do we have an estimate of what a new water source identification and development would cost?
We would say in the range of, so just for the well itself, probably around $5 million.
That's what
and
I
then
thought.
The infrastructure to get there, it all depends of where that well is sourced. I
So-
can't give an answer on that.
So you'd have to have it, for that to be cost effective for a developer, they'd need to be building 5+ oases contemporaneously, right?
Yes.
So that's,
We don't expect that option to be used often, but we don't want to handcuff ourselves either and not have that as an option if a very large user comes in, as we've been hearing, potentially in town.
okay. Can you go back to the slide with the 3 options? So the first option, applicant identifies and completes water conservation. So if you're building a new apartment building in the same zone as an existing apartment building, then the new builder could go to the owner-operator of the existing and say, hey, I'd like to upgrade your toilets and water fixtures. That's what that is?
Yes.
But so that requires, obviously, the buy-in or willingness from the private property owner to have that process undertaken. And where does the town get involved in that? Do they like sign off on purchase orders or something to verify that this work is done? Or?
So we have a table, and I believe it was in the packet of information, that lists what the flow rates are for different fixtures,
Right.
old, new. They would be required to provide proof of what they purchased and what they replaced.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would confirm that the amount of flow that they mitigated matches what they were adding to the system.
Okay, so trust but verify.
Trust but verify.
Okay. All right. And I guess with the balance fee, so you said it's a one-time fee, which was going to be one of my questions before you said that. But, I mean, the other two options create a sustained partial solution, or if they did buy us a $5 million wellhead, then a longer-term solution, a bigger solution. But the water balance mitigation fee is just sort of this one-time buyout. And then if you're building an apartment building, that could be there for 50 years or more, continuing to cause that added drain. So is that current $10 and $20 per 10,000 gallon or under or over, is that factoring that in as well, like that it's not a one-time bump, that it's a perpetual bump?
That is based off of a recommendation that we got from our consultant who helped pull this program together. I can't speak to that on that if it was factored in on those. I think it's more of these are typical fees of what you see for these programs. I can say that as part of this program, the water department will have the discretion of what we ask them to do for the conservation measures, so it can be a mixture of these as well.
Okay. So can you go to the slide with the other communities and what they're doing? So have any of these communities had any, as far as you're aware, any pushback on this from challenges that these are like illegal impact fees or anything like that?
So not that I'm aware of. I do know that I believe it was Danvers was actually required to do this because they were exceeding their withdrawals from the state permits. So, and that Mass DEP does recommend water banking, which is essentially what this is, as a water conservation method.
Okay. Is this an exhaustive list of other communities that do this, or are there other communities? It's okay if they're not listed. I'm just curious.
I know Acton has one. A lot of other communities do more of like a rebate type program.
Okay.
We were just trying to be a little more proactive rather than just doing a rebate and encompass more.
Okay. Thank you.
Just, when are you going to have the legal question answered?
I don't have an answer to that, but I will follow up with them immediately.
Okay, all right. So as soon as you get that answer, please let us know.
Sure.
What's the anticipated revenue? I know you
It all depends on the
what do you-
development. It's totally development based. I don't know what's going to come in. I mean, like I said, this is the past. I mean, at least you can see those major projects, but it's really development based.
Right. But what's coming up, the future? Do you know what's in the pipeline?
I don't know what's
Okay.
in the pipeline right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can help with a little bit of that, things that we've been told may come up. So Claremont will be in front of the board next week to talk about their 300-unit. What was Oasis, 300 units? Oasis, I think it was. So the Claremont project is similar to the Oasis project at 300 units. Pulte is going to be in front of the board, and then probably the next 6 to 8 weeks, they're proposing 150 units. That's the Hedge Road property. the Sheen family sold recently to Pulte Projects. And then there's Boston South, which we're not quite sure what they're proposing for the number of units.
So it could be a couple million a year or something, which,
Yeah, if we're having the large developments that come in,
okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Mr. Mahoney?
So I guess, is this a similar timeline? If you can get a question answered on the legality of this, we're shooting to come back on the 30th or a subsequent date for a vote or potential vote?
Yeah. I mean, there's not as much of a tight timeline for this, but yeah, we'll work on getting those answers as soon as possible.
Yeah, if I could, I do think that this one is time sensitive as well, given the projects that we know are in the pipeline.
Yes.
Okay.
So if we have questions, we can stop by, maybe make a little appointment, and
Come on in, I'm
to
on the
just make it
fourth
less
floor.
painful for the people that have to watch. Thank you. And then we have a gardens at Plymouth Public Library. Judy Fosdick. I know they have, I know.
We should have put them.
Well, we did put the other one there.
I know. They're brave.
Your light on? The green light, Judy. Press it.
Thank you. I'm Judy Fosdick. I live at 37 Union Street. I am the Vice President of the Board of Plymouth Public Library Board of Trustees and the Foundation. You know that the Foundation is a private corporate nonprofit that is that supports the library financially for things. Oh, thank you very much. I'm here to ask for the Select Board's approval to take down 5 brick veneered brick cinder block columns that are in a garden space behind the library. The library has taken on a project to improve that space. It was a square of grass, and we felt that it really could be much more, having some shade. This is the rendering of what we'd like to do there. Shade trees. And you'll see back here, originally we said, well, we had a pergola that supported, those pillars supported. And the DPW took those pillars down about a year ago. And because those were rotted, the pergola was rotted, it was sort of a dangerous situation at the library. They took that down, but they didn't take the pillars down. So when we were having a master plan drawn up for this garden, the pillars remained in place because we didn't want to go to the expense of taking them down at that time. In the meantime, this March, the DPW took down, this March, we had to assess the space for a DPW need for getting a crane into the library, because at the roof of the top of the roof, there are utilities there, and they need a crane sometimes to get to that space. So the master plan we had created had to be shifted. So now the garden will go behind these pillars, and the pillars are just standing there, not in the right place. So I'm asking permission to take these pillars down using a landscape group called 40 Landscape, who will do it for $3,700. The foundation will pay for it, and the taxpayers won't. So that's why I'm here, and I think that presently the garden is barren, it's unattractive, it's underutilized. And when the project is completed, I believe the Plymouth Library patrons will enjoy the peace, the shade of this space. The library staff will be pleased to have a delightful space to hold programs. And the Board of Trustees will have a lovely place to hold events as well. So I'm willing to answer any questions you might have.
I got a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Galuzzi.
I'm a huge fan of the library. I'll say that right off. So is that behind the library? That's not the front.
Behind the library, yes,
Because
that's
I've
right.
never, wow, that'll be beautiful.
And we have, I should mention that the Plymouth Garden Club does the beds at the front of the library.
It
They're
always looks
particularly beautiful right now
Always
with the
looks
daffodils
good,
blooming. And the Evening Garden Club, which is the second garden club that we also have in Plymouth, has volunteered to do the maintenance of any beds. There will be small beds at the back here, and they will maintain those beds for us. So it's a nice community project in the sense that other people are involved. I think it brings great value to the town's building. I think it's a great space for people to relax. Many people living in apartments and they don't have that outdoor space, it's a nice public
It's a great use of the space. And you have some seniors living in the area that I'm sure would love to sit out there. And it's a good, for the garden club, a good place for them to show their plantings and
That's true.
Yeah. And before I got my Kindle, I was in that building at least twice a week.
Oh, good.
But now the Kindle is, and I have to learn how to hook it up to the library. But you have a great staff there, great people, and this is going to be beautiful. So,
Great.
yeah, thank you. You got my support.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Canty.
Do you need a motion from us to give you permission?
I just wanted to inform you of the project and let you know, we felt that the town should, because we're touching, the pillars are part of the building in a sense, the facility, that we should ask your permission.
How many pillars are there?
5.
5 sets or 5 total?
No, 5 total.
Okay. I'd make a motion that we permit the Library Foundation to remove the 5 pillars that they're requesting.
And I'll second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Blutzer. Discussion. Mr. Helm? No? Oh, I'm sorry, you're late on. Just getting ready to vote. Judy, I just want to apologize for the wait tonight. To all
You
of
have
yous,
bigger
but-
problems than this, but thank you very much for hearing me.
And I just have one other question. What's your approximate start date once?
It's starting.
Like right away?
Having this, we can start tomorrow. So this will look quite, it won't have trees quite
No,
this
but I mean, I'm
big.
just curious.
But it'll be finished by May 15th, we're pretty
Awesome.
sure. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Judy, one question for you. Have you asked the DPW to remove those?
We did ask them, and Carl Anderson met with us and said that he thought they could, but then when he asked about, his approval to have it done, it didn't look like it was going to get on the schedule for very, in a timely way that would make sense, and that's why we are suggesting that Mr. Forty do it.
And you're not going to take any sand and gravel out, right?
No.
Okay,
No.
perfect, good, thank you.
Mr. Blutzer? How do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Helm?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you.
Thank you very
And
much.
thanks for all you people doing. The gardens look good that I saw online. Nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone wishing to speak under public comment? Please identify yourself for the record. Make sure the little green light's on. Mr. Brewster?
Russell Brewster, I'm on various boards and committees, chair of Precinct 15. But tonight I'm here as a moderator of the Chiltonville Congregational Church, representing the entire church membership. You recently had before you a hearing for a beer and wine license for Bramhall's Country Store, which you voted to allow. The church was not well represented on that night. I'm here tonight to let you know that we took your advice and we met with Ben Bramhall. Our church does not oppose Bramhall's application for a beer and wine license. Ben and the church have worked out the parking issues for everyone's satisfaction, and we welcome Bramhall's customers to park in our lot if needed. We respect and greatly value our 200-plus year relationship with Bramhalls and the Chiltonville community, and apologize for any upset our church may have caused as a result of the prior hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak on the public comment? Anybody online? Okay. Mr. Brindisi, Town Manager report.
Okay, so I'd like to start with some good news. I want to congratulate the senior task force, Commissioner Michelle Brady, and the Deputy Director for the CAL, Caitlin Correa, for finally achieving and officially becoming an age and dementia-friendly community. So this has been multiple years, Mr. Helm, who also serves on this community, on this committee. So again, a lot of congratulations to the committee and the staff for putting in the multiple years of work to get this official designation. Not only is this important for the community, but it will set us up for grant opportunities in the future. So we're looking forward to what else we can do in that discipline. As far as DPW projects, Water Street continues to move forward. It's going extremely well. We have approximately 5 more weeks left of this project. The area of Brewster Street, as you know, down to the DCR restrooms has been closed and will be closed for the next 5 weeks. Assuming things continue to go well, we'll be putting the road back together far in advance of our expected closure date of June 30th. So I'll keep you posted on that as well. And then the Bartlett Road Bridge Project and the Brook Road Bridge Project, again, continue to move along well. We're expecting those 2 bridge projects to be completed in sometime in early June as well. And then I just wanted to bring to the board's attention the prescribed burns that have been taking place over the last few weeks. The fire chief reported this morning that the state has burnt over 500 acres of land down by the Camp Catch-A-Lot area in the state forest. He says in his 20-plus years serving this community, this is the largest prescribed burn. The environment has allowed the state to achieve this many acres, and so it's actually not only healthy for the environment, but certainly from a forest fire perspective, we believe it'll save lives and homes if we ever had a large fire. So a lot of work goes to our Plymouth Fire Department, who's been observing those and monitoring those burns to make them safe. And then last, I just want to mention that on May 15th, Chief Flynn will be inviting the community to the police headquarters for a unveiling of the new Fallen Officers Memorial. That'll take place at 10 a.m., again, at the police headquarters. So everyone will be invited, and we'll have a great ceremony that morning. It's going to be May 15th at 10 a.m. at the police headquarters. Pending any questions, that's all I have this evening.
Any questions for the town manager? Anybody, any member, new business? Really?
Yes, I do. Derek, we all got an email from Mary Gatzlick from Chiltonville concerned with some speeding in the neighborhoods around, looks around the hospital, Clifford Road, Jordan Road, Sandwich Road, and Old Sandwich Road. Is that something, can you pass that on to Chief Flynn?
So I've already passed that on to
the
okay. Department of Public Works. Specifically, that'll go over to the Roads Advisory Committee to look at those intersections and the speed limits.
Sure, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else, new business? Letters? Old business? I have some old business / new business. I'd like to thank the town moderator, town staff, all the town meeting members for a nice town meeting, boards, committees, everybody. My takeaway from that is with the increase that we have coming with taxes, to look forward and get focused on what we can do to help the residents and help ourselves. So I've reached out to the chairman of the planning board. When I say we, I mean the town and this board. And we have a couple 40Bs coming up. One's going to be Claremont, and I believe the second one is going to be the Elknife-Sheehan property. Now we look at this, we've always looked at it as a town as let's get out and fight. There's also a silver lining to this if it's done properly and recognized by the state. We'll be in a safe harbor for 2 years. What will that do? It'll give us time to finish our master plan and create maybe commercial zones where everybody talks about commercial development, and I get it. Where? So I've talked with Mr. Hartman and some other department heads through the town manager, of course, And we have to start looking at some soft sites. What I'm saying is we got to come together and get moving and get focused. And that safe harbor window, if we get there, which I believe we will give us 2 years. We don't have to worry about a 40B as a community. And that's why I'm saying, putting it out there, maybe we need to look at it different. We're going to have to take it anyway, so let's take it. Let's plan for the future. We got a 2-year window, and do all the things we want in Plymouth and try to do what's right for the citizens in this town. So, again, thank you to everybody. It's not just my idea. It's our idea as a board. We need to work with the planning board. We also need to look at an express permit. I've talked about that with different individuals, where if you have a 10,000, whatever it might be, 10,000 building or a 12,000, that you don't have to wait 2.5 years before you can put the shovel in the ground. And by the same token, we want balance, and we know where there's some big conservation parcels of land coming, I hope, I pray. And that'll balance all out and take a breath and get us on the right track. That's really what I'm hoping for. So I'm looking for comments, and not necessarily tonight, but think about what your thoughts are, and let's get together and get rolling. So that's all I have. And a good job by management and all our staff that went to town meeting. Everyone did a good job. It really was. But we need to take away from there what's going on in town. We understand how we got there. We're not going to go into that whole big deal, but we have to deal with it, and we have to plan. So I think now it's time to turn gears and do it. And now that people are watching, not in my backyard here or not, and I'm just throwing that out there, but there's just as many people saying, I can't afford this anymore. So we have to change in what we're doing. So that's the message from tonight. Motion?
So moved.
Second?
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
That's it, unanimous. Thank you.